morning, ladies and gentlemen. At the very outset, I need to acknowledge and thank EastNet and Dellsons for inviting me here to this wonderful conference on the subject that's close to the heart of bankers and regulators. First of all, how did you like the introduction? I wrote it. I think Mr. Azhar, when he initiated this proceedings this morning, mentioned about the fact that he is not supposed to address, he was continuously addressing Mr. Nadeem Hussain as Nadeem Sahab, and then he corrected himself and he said that, I believe I'm not supposed to add the suffix of Sahab. Mr. Azhar, a little clarification on that. I think my understanding is that the word Sahab in Urdu language is representative of the English word Mr., which is added as a prefix to the name. It is to indicate two things. One, respect. Second, formality. So when the Chief Justice made that remark in the court of asking people not to add the suffix of Sahab, he was not trying to create any disorder in our cultural standards of conveying respect to people by calling them Sahab. He was merely identifying that in case you are referring to somebody who holds an office, so it is not to be confused with the office. For the office, you just refer to the designation itself, the nomenclature. So it's not DSP Sahab. It is not Chief Justice Sahab. Okay, it's like that. I believe that that's what he meant, because I don't think so we can do away with the cultural standard of respecting our people. So it's perfectly fine to call Sahab. You can, wherever you are, Mr. Azhar. The only problem with us Pakistanis is that we confuse Mr. and Sahab and put it together and say Mr. Sirajuddin Aziz Sahab. And that's where things go wrong. Nevertheless, the subject at hand. The element of development of the human mind over centuries of wanting to do things better and quicker has brought us to where we are. We want speed in our life and we want new things in our life. There has to be a change. Although I subscribe, being an old school of thought, I subscribe to Audrey Hepburn's view, when you're beautiful, why change? But nevertheless, we have gone for the change. While somebody is imagining, ladies and gentlemen, the idea of flying like a bird and trying to think and conceptualize in the mind a semblance of what we see today of an aircraft, we also find there are people sitting on the sidelines and imagining, what if something goes wrong? So they think of building parachutes. So the two go hand in glove. So the advancement in technology must necessarily be accompanied by necessary controls, necessary ways and means to prevent ourselves from disasters as a result of advancement in technology. We have recently seen, having spent a good part of my career outside of the country, I've seen that technology did not induce so much of fraudulent activity in the society as much as it has done to us in very short span of time, regrettably. And those who are victim of these fraudulent transactions are essentially people who are well educated. And those who are perpetrating are not necessarily highly educated. Last evening, I was at a hearing in Lahore, and one of the complainants mentioned that he had issued a check for 200,000 rupees, while his account was debited for 1,200,000. And he had brought in a forensic report on the check from one of the law enforcement agencies based in Islamabad. And he gave that to me as evidence. I looked at it and I read it out to him and I said, it says, the report said, that the tampering in the amount mentioned in figures, the instrument used for tampering that amount in figures is the same as the instrument used for signing the check. So I tried to tell him that the same person, which is essentially you yourself, must have done so. That's what the report says. But he was insisting, no, it says that this is a fraud. I said, nowhere does it say. Then I realized, after much an argument with the individual, not an argument from my side, he was arguing with the forum, I realized something that I read somewhere. When you're talking to a hungry man and you put up a contraption, say, for example, this, and say, what is this? He would say, it's bread. So the law of averages is not to be please applied on the fact that we have had trillions of rupees of transactions done on digital platforms. The person who loses out a single rupee as a consequence of this advancement in technology, he will not look at this development as a positive one. So in conversations with these complainants, I have begun to realize that they are, over a period of time, losing complete faith in the banking industry. They start accusing bankers of colluding with these fraudsters, which I know for a fact is not the case. And if it is so, it must be very stray and rare and few and far. But that's the impression that is being created in the minds of the people. We need to have some kind of semblance of sanity to see that, all units operating in the country work in unison. The situation today is that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is up to. Pakistan possibly is one of the few countries of the world that has got an amazing document for identification, which is our CNIC. It's a unique number that each one of us has. And therefore, the ability to be able to use that number in all sets of transactions and see that it matches is rather easy, but only if all the organizations would cooperate with each other, would lend hand to each other in that cooperation. Only then the development can take place, the digitization can take place. Otherwise, what's happening today? The result is that we talk of financial inclusion. Now, financial inclusion is a necessary requirement for economic growth. Absolutely correct. I think there is no doubt in the minds of any of the people sitting in the audience or those who are not here, the policymakers. But do they have in mind that they wish to simultaneously promote a fraudulent society or a fraudulent activity? Certainly not. So then why is it happening? Because of the lack of application of the need to coordinate. We talk of teledensity in Pakistan. I believe there are more than 125 or 135 million cellular users in Pakistan. Each one of them had to give their own unique ID card to get that SIM. So how is it that all of us have got multiple SIMs? How is it that we've got 3 or 4 cell phones with us and they are not linked, unfortunately? I have been exposed in the last 6 months to amazing kind of frauds. A mention was made this morning by one of the speakers. Let me mention, because it's a live case that I personally handled. One of the highest ranking individuals in the armed forces called me very early in the morning, and he says to me that, Mr. Aziz, I'm extremely embarrassed to call you. The moment he said that, I said something to him in Urdu. I will repeat it, but pardon my remark that I made to him. I said to him, Aapke saath bhi haath ho gaya hai. He said, precisely, you used the right words. And I said, so how much is the loss? He said, 950,000. And then he voluntarily tells me, I answered every question that was posed to me over the telephone. I said, who is the caller? He said, I'm unable to identify. I have the number, but nobody helps me. Now, this is a very highest ranking individual in our armed forces, unable to track down that number. Obviously, that number has been given here in Pakistan. How is it that we can't trace the individuals? Because we are not letting the systems work properly. They are in place, they are available. We are not exploiting them to our advantage. Consequently, what do we see? Only yesterday's press, okay, not a story of antiquity I'm narrating, yesterday's press. A gang of fraudsters indulging in digital fraud caught in Gujranwala were released on bail within 24 hours of their apprehending. Okay, if you're going to work in that mechanism, that sort of thought process, then it's going to be very difficult to make progress and yet not face these consequences of the frauds that we see there. A young girl appears before us in the forum and she says that with great difficulty, I was able to save 275,000 rupees, which were lying in a saving account of mine. I got a call and I was asked to, the caller had all the details about me, including my mother's maiden name. Now that is where they start suspecting the bankers, because the mother's maiden name is a very, obviously not everybody has got access to that information even within the institution, right? So that's where the suspicion starts. She says, when he mentioned my mother's maiden name, my level of confidence on the caller suddenly increased. And he started me all kinds of questions. He said that in the event you don't answer this one, your account is going to get blocked and we're going to report to you as part of terror financing. So out of fear, this is a young girl, 27, 28-year-old, who had served maybe 5-6 years in the organization that she was working for, had saved some money from her salary. She disclosed the OTP. And that's when she will realize that maybe some fraud was being committed. So as soon as the cell she put down, she called up the bank and asked, what's the balance? And they said 2 rupees. Okay, and then when she's talking to the call center person says to her that you have also utilized the loan that you had applied for. She said, I never applied for any loan. He said, no, you applied for the loan. And an installment is due in 60 days' time. And this is the amount of installment I'm narrating to you over a recorded call. While narrating to the forum, I could see that she was literally trembling. When I looked at the records of the bank, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what we are trying to do. The loan was disbursed to this young girl without her consent and her knowledge in 44 seconds. An amount of 1 million rupees. And then now she was being followed up for repayment of that loan as well, while nothing was being done to make good the loss that she had suffered. I talked to the bank president there and I said that, what do you intend doing now? He said, well, she has taken the loan. I said, she is right here before us and I have no reason to doubt her veracity of what she's saying. So she has not taken the loan and you disbursed the loan in 44 seconds. You explain to me your process of how do you approve a loan? And the kind of fundamentals that the individual mentioned shocked the wits out of me. Yes, I have been a lending banker in my career also, so I know how lending is done. Okay, while one is appreciative of the fact that giving a loan to a needy individual who needs fast money for reasons that could be education, medical, or whatever, an emergency, while we appreciate that, but does it mean that we make it so easy that fraudsters can avail of it? So obviously, okay, whatever decisions I took on the spot, one was that she will not pay a single penny of that loan and that nobody will visit her again at her residence and insult her publicly in the presence of people. And 2, how quickly they would make good the loss of 275,000. Now, this is where I wish to bring to your attention, because I believe there are bankers sitting out here and there are also regulators. OTP, ladies and gentlemen, is quoted to me day in and day out by bankers as consent of the customer. Nay, no, it is not a consent. It is a transaction mechanism that you're using. It does not mean that the customer has given any consent to opening up any of the platforms of the digital financing. You have to obtain it on an expressed basis. Now, where do you obtain it? That also is a very tricky one. It is obtained on the account opening form. There are these boxes that the customer is required to tick. And most of the customers declare that I never ticked anything out here. I didn't even fill up the form. They are right also, because I've also filled forms on behalf of my customers as part of service. Okay, but little knowing that this could be misused, either by the customer or the institution itself. So, one, I have, by experience, telling you, particularly the young bankers sitting here, don't offer this extra service. Let the client fill up the form, him or herself, in their own handwriting. Never do that. Two, as part of regulation, bankers are required to provide a copy of the account opening form at the time of the banker-customer relationship being established. And if you do not provide that, the customer has a chance and a possibility of declaring that he wrote nothing on the account opening form. So please ensure that practice at your account opening level. That is where all the problems are emanating. My experience tells me that that is where the initiation of frauds are taking place. It's at the level of opening of accounts. And that brings me to the subject of digital accounts and a nomenclature used by the regulator, Asan accounts. The word Asan is a Urdu word meaning ease in English. Ease of opening the account. Ease is not to facilitate fraudulent activity. So with absolute irresponsibility and disdain, when the banker stands at the rostrum and we make a few queries that how did this happen, the answer is, sir, ye Asan account tha. Okay, fine, Asan account. It was. Does it mean that you would reduce your standards of KYC? Has the State Bank of Pakistan said to any bank by virtue of a letter or a circular that you reduce your KYC standards on Asan accounts? No, it hasn't. So how come these standards have been lowered? Consequently, what happens is that when the digital fraud takes place, i.e., through spoofing, a call comes in, OTP is mentioned, transaction takes place. So as a banker, my job is to see what is the end use of these funds. I want to find out where do they land. And all these funds land in digital accounts, in Asan accounts. And when I ask the banker, where is this customer? Can you trace me for him? We don't know. I said, did you do a KYC? Yes, we did. I said, do you have a CNIC? I said, yes, we have. I said, have you visited the place? No. Why not? That's one of the requirements. And you have to do that at least once in 2 years, or as per your own institution's policy. Consequently, the decamped individual takes off all the money in one go and is off the hook, can't trace him. So who is facilitating all this? You and I. It's not the intelligence of the fraudster, it is the lack of our application of our controls that is facilitating fraud in the society. So please, Asan account is not meant to be Asan for fraud. It is to be Asan for ease of doing business. Those of you who read newspapers still, I took that pause to know whether you do or you do not. But in case you do, please go back to an article in Business Recorder yesterday written by a husband and wife team who moved out of Pakistan and set up something called the Metrics, which is their platform, which is being used by, I think, about 100 international banks. And they write a paragraph on ease of doing business and define it so beautifully in terms of how quick it was for them to establish a banking relationship in United Arab Emirates and how difficult it is in Pakistan. But there was no lowering of standards in the establishment of that account relationship. All the requirements had to be fulfilled, and they're fulfilled with speed. That's the only difference. Can't we do it? We can also. And I completely refuse, and I'm in denial of it, if it be true, that we are not in any manner less intelligent than anybody else on planet Earth. I think we as a nation are far more superior in intelligence than many other nations. That's a claim I make, and I am very confident about that. So how is it that we falter the most in most areas of our activities? It is because we have failed to give respect to certain norms, regulations, demands on us by the society that places it upon us, by the regulations that are in place, by the law that is in practice. We need to look at these aspects, ladies and gentlemen, and please, I remind you once again, that no matter who calls, whether he introduces himself as the president of this country or he introduces himself as one who is doing some janitorial work, just bang the phone. Don't take the call. Don't respond. Don't answer. Don't say a word. Because the mechanisms that they have come up are amazing. I've overshot my time already. I haven't even begun. No, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not torturing you. I'll just finish off in the next 2 minutes, okay? The SIM activity, I'm amazed at how the SIMs are blocked temporarily for half an hour only. And in that half an hour, the caller, the fraudster makes a call on that same number and the OTPs are delivered at some other SIM. And the banks are unaware of it. The transactions are therefore processed because requirements are being met. Okay. The cell phone, you go to a shop, you give your cell phone, in a minute, the SIM is changed and you're not aware of it. And by the time you're aware of it, money has already been offloaded your account. The splintering that takes place, what happens is that, for example, could I use you as an example, or a very wrong one? Okay, he's a fraudster. I'm the good person here. Okay, he does a fraud and sends money into my account. I'm unaware. Okay? And he has access to my account, and through that he sends to these 5 people in different banks. And this is done in a fraction of a minute. In one particular case, I asked them what kind of monitoring your institution follows. This person in 7 minutes has taken 27 transactions of 49,900 rupees. Is there a pattern? Aren't you monitoring the patterns? Is there no live monitoring of it? How could these transactions go through? And now when you see that the amount of money has been distributed into 17 accounts and none of those account holders are traceable by banks. That is where the catch is. Okay? So first and foremost, as a consumer, I request you not to take calls that you don't recognize. Just refuse to take calls on your cell. As banker, regulator, I request you that please, let's coordinate our activities. The law enforcement agencies, the cellular companies, and the financial institutions. Let not progress be used for defining a new standard of our society. God bless you all. I hope you have a very good session for the entire day. God bless you all.